Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, as I say every episode, thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you for checking this episode out, whether you've just started listening to us or been there since the beginning. So excited to have you join us in this conversation. And as always, keep those tweets, emails, messages coming the show's way and coming my way. I really do appreciate that. And again, so happy that you're here joining us. This is something that we all as coaches wrestle with. We all have to make decisions about what we're going to run with the player personnel that we have, whether we're in high school like myself and we don't know exactly who's coming in, whether you're in college and you're trying to recruit players and see where all the pieces fit and how offense is going to work with the players that you're recruiting and trying to bring in. We all kind of have to answer that question of how are we going to make our offense work with the players that we have available to us. And because this is coming out here in the off season, I know a lot of you listening are wrestling with that as well. And so I'm really excited to bring this to you and talk about some roster construction, offense construction, kind of working on those ideas about making the most with the players that you have on the court. So excited to have you listening, and so excited to have my guest on today to share his insights on this. He's the head coach on the women's side at Coady College. Very happy to be joined by Coach Coach Belk today. Coach, really appreciate you being able to come on and join us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Coach, let's start with you and your basketball journey, and let's start with your coaching journey. Where has this great game of basketball taken you that ultimately led you to Coady College?
Yeah, no, it's a fun journey. I get to do what I wanted to do. I mean, as a kid, I have a little piece of paper from I think it was like first or second grade that said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And it says college coach, and so I get to literally live out my dream. And so I started where a lot of people do, junior high basketball, and
Right.
um, got the opportunity to have my first coaching experience while I was still in college. I played collegiately myself, and then got the opportunity to go make that jump. Um, and then after a couple of years in the junior high division, jumped up to the high school ranks. Got to coach under a wonderful coach at Carthage High School, Coach Moore, who has ties to Missouri State. He was on their staff for a while, and man, just got to learn and grow from him. And um, coached there for a couple years, and then I get a phone call one day from a mentor of mine who was retired, Dr. Mitz. She was the head women's coach at Missouri Southern, which is a Division II school here in Missouri, and just a legend, Hall of Famer. She had been retired for over a decade, and I had asked her to mentor me because I was trying to jump into the college ranks, basically any way that I could.
Mhm.
And she gave me a lot of pointers. But anyway, she calls me one day, and she said, "I'm coming out of retirement. Why don't you come with me, be my assistant?" She ends up getting the athletic director job here at Coady, and slided me over after 3 years to the head coaching position. And so, just blessed to have the opportunity to do it. And yeah, that's that in a nutshell. That's as quickly as I could get through it. But yeah.
Well, let me ask you about that jump that you make coaching on the
Yeah.
college side. I know I got a lot of listeners who may be looking to get into that side of the game and wondering what it's like to take that college position and step into that big chair of the head coach of the college ranks. How did you find the process this past year? Were there a lot of surprises involved, a lot of a learning curve involved? What was that like?
Mhm. It was a massive learning curve. I also decided that the best time to have my first kid was in the middle of the season.
Oh, wow.
So so we had a little bit different journey, and so but yes, massive learning curve. But whether it's recruiting, whether it's just figuring out what you want to do when it's your program. I had an opportunity. They announced me back in September that I was going to take over after the end of this year. And so I had a little bit longer learning curve. I had a lot of time to think analytically just about just different things about the program. But the number one thing that kind of stuck out to me is just making sure that I'm being a good steward of the program, that I'm making sure that I leave it in a better place than what I found it. That's what, Coach Mitz always says about a program and when you have that opportunity. And so, I know I know, being a college coach is something that a lot of people aspire towards. And I sent out close to 200 resumes when I was a high school coach to different colleges, trying to knock in the doors. And so you could say I failed 99.9% of the time, but it just took that 1%, that one person saying yes. And so, a lot of times we end up potentially giving up just because we get a lot of no's. And and I just, for anyone that may be discouraged about where they currently find themselves or, want to jump the ranks, it just takes one person believing in you. I mean, it really does. And so just continue to seek that out, believe in it, believe in yourself. And then, yeah, where I find myself, it's just one day after another and just finding that opportunity to just be better than the day before. And so that's just what I aspire towards
And that
every day.
that persistence can pay off,
Yeah.
especially if you want, especially when you write it down at a young age that this is what you want to do.
Yes.
You ain't going to be discouraged
Yes.
that quickly, are you?
That's it. That's it.
Speaking of which, perfect segue to another topic I know that you're passionate about, which is about player confidence. And of
Yeah.
course, we all know as listeners that our players' confidence can definitely go up and down. It can definitely fluctuate depending on situations they find themselves in, shooting slumps or
Mhm.
things that might not be going the best, or other things that they got going on their mind that might be affecting their confidence. So I wanted to ask you about what is it that you do in your work with players who might be losing confidence or who might be a little bit hesitant or doubting themselves in some way? How do you approach those conversations or work with those players to kind of get them back on track and kind of chin up, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean that's such a good question. And the first thing that I would say is, I do believe in, I don't know if you've heard it, but confidence comes from within. And I do
Hmm.
believe that to a point, but I also think we as coaches can hinder that. And so, I've had a lot of coaches, only you can, only you can handle your confidence. No one else can take that away. And I don't believe in that. I think that's a very uh challenging take. And so while confidence does come from within, I think we have to be stewards as coaches to make sure that we're fostering that confidence, understanding who our players here are and how they tick. What makes them motivated, and especially when you're dealing with a young person that is dealing with confidence issues, um, we have to make sure that we are not adding to those lack of confidence. And so the first thing that I do with kids that are lacking confidence is show them film of their success. I think I would have to say almost 80 to 85% of high schools now have to have huddle. I know
Mm,
it used to be a day where that wasn't the case, but if you have huddle and they stat, go, or for me it's synergy, go show that student the success that they've had. Is it your best shooter? Is it someone that isn't necessarily the great shooter? But I mean, anyone can put together good highlight tape. Show them where they're finding their success. Let them visually see them putting the ball in the bucket, and just help that confidence as well. A big thing for us too within our program as well is making sure that they know what is a good shot for them and what is a good shot for the program and actually
right.
having that conversation with them. I think a lot of times we become very outcome based as far as if it's a good shot, that means it's a make. If it's a miss, that means it's a bad shot. And I think
Yeah.
that's just something we have to stay away from. And so we have, and you'll hear this a lot in my conversation. So I'll just go ahead and get it out now. We rate every shot in our program 0 out of 10. Zero basically being, I guess you could say, a full court heave, and then a 10 being the most perfect shot you make 100% of the time, which of course you and I know never happens. So
No, of course not.
we fight for every single program, for every single shot in our program to be a 7 or a 9. And so the very first meeting that we have every single August when we have our first team meeting is what is a 7 and what's a 9 in our program. So for us, this doesn't have to be you, but for us, depending on the player, a 9 is a wide open catch and shoot three,
Mm,
or a wide open layup. A 7 for some people, it's an off the dribble three. A contested layup. At the college level, we're not going to have very many wide open layups, so you got to finish. I'm not
hope
talking
not.
necessarily right. You know, um, I'm not talking about two people contested layups, but you got to finish around the rim with people being around there. So we tell them, um, if you shoot a 7 or a 9, regardless of the outcome, we're not going to say anything. We've recruited you here saying that you can take these shots. Everyone in our program can shoot. We want them to shoot. And so for us, it's about gaining their trust. So let's say they do take a 7 or 9 in our program. We don't say a word if it doesn't go in. In fact, we don't say a word if it does go in because this is such an outcome game where, what's going to do more damage? Us being upset at them missing a shot because maybe we didn't want them to take that shot, but it technically is a shot that we want in our program, or them second guessing 3 wide open shots and not taking it. I believe that them second guessing 3 wide open shots does so much more damage than maybe that 1 7 that they took when they probably should have fought for a 9. And so we've chosen within our program to have that type of conversation. So we've gained their trust. We want them to shoot it when they're open. We want everyone to be a threat within our program, and that comes from clear definition, clear roles, and putting the best players in the best positions.
I think what it's like big on what you said is that I think I can get that way as a coach too, where any shot that goes in, oh, it's a good shot because it went in. But
Right,
that's not at all true. I've seen some like,
right.
how did that go in? And like I don't and at the same point, like bad, shots that don't go in, but it's like, man, if we get that look, 10 times out of 10, I'm confident that it's going to work out more often than not. And
Yeah,
yeah, no, and I think that's really key. And I also think, to kind of what it is that you added, I think you mentioned as well, as coaches, kind of our body language or the way that we react to, certain shots or the way that we react to certain things on the
right.
court. I think our players can pick up on, that facial expression or that sigh or that,
Yes,
they
absolutely.
do a shot and we just like sit down and it's like that could completely lose a player right there. Even if you didn't
Yes,
say anything, they know. And yeah, and that keeping that positivity there and knowing that like, hey, like, as a coach, right, not every day is going to be my best day either, and things
right.
fluctuate. And I think we got to allow our players to have that forgiveness that we have to, we're not perfect and we're going to fluctuate, and so will our players as well.
Absolutely. And to kind of play off of that, our best player all conference, her name's Sarah Hunt. She's an incredible scorer and she can do things that just other people in our program just weren't gifted as talently to do, but she's such a great kid and great worker. We do this drill in practice where it's a 5v5 drill, half court. We call it 7s and 9s. And basically, if you run the offense and you get a 7 or 9, no matter if it goes in or doesn't go in, as long as it's 7 or 9, you get the ball back. And so the defense has to stay on until they force something less than a 7. And it forces the defense to play harder. It forces the offense to look for shots that we want within our offense. And I'll never forget Sarah Hunt. She drove and took this, nice little mid range. It was contested. It's just a shot that Hunt can hit and something that I necessarily would like at, the end of a shot clock or whatever, the end of a game maybe, but just wasn't something that we wanted. And her teammates were high fiving her. And I told them to switch. I said, that wasn't a 7 or a 9.
Mm.
And they kind of looked at me. But let me tell you, they fought for 7s and 9s so much faster. So sometimes us just sticking up and being like, hey, that's a great shot, but still not something we can necessarily live with to beat the best teams in our conference. So, we're going to go ahead and make that switch and just put that dedication into really trying to create that thing. I've also done it the opposite where, if someone gets kicked out for a wide open three and they decide to pass on it, I blow the whistle, switch it up. We passed up a 7. Yeah, next time shoot that sucker. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a big thing. And like you said, you could do a lot of damage to kids' confidence with, like you said, just a sigh, a roll of it, and like you said, we don't have the we don't have great days either. And so just having just being able to own it to your team and say, yeah, I messed up here, or this wasn't the best day, or whatever, they'll gain respect for that as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right, coach, let's talk about uh your process of choosing an offense. Now you're in an interesting position at the collegiate level where obviously you're
yeah.
in the recruiting process a bit, and I know that this is your first year, so you probably inherited most of who it is that you have right now. But let me ask about the process of assessing your roster, taking a look at who it is that you have, and
Mhm.
then making a determination on offense from there. What was that process like?
Yeah, the first thing that I would like to say is, being at the NAI level, I do get to choose to some extent who I recruit. Now they still have to say yes, right? But um there comes a point where some players that are just very talented maybe didn't line up with what I wanted to do offensively, defensively, but they're just too good to pass up, right? And so like that to the point I've been able to resonate with high school coaches is sometimes it's like, hey, if you got a talented kid that does X, Y, and Z, but you wanted to do A, B, C, like you kind of have to make those switches. But as far as assessing your roster, determining the best offense to run, I read a study from Huddle, and it talked about 4 categories that lead to winning. And so, according to this study that Huddle did, they looked at all the static games. If you can win these 4 categories in a basketball game, you have a 98% chance to win it. And that stuck out to me. And so these are the 4 categories that we have in our offense. If you were to go look at our, ask our players, what does Coach Belk harp on, they'll list these out. They'll list it out like nothing. So the first one is having more offensive rebounds than the other team. Um, every time you grab an offensive rebound, you could technically add 20% to whatever your team usually shoots. You also need to have less turnovers. That's the second one, than the other program. You have to make more free throws than the other team. And the last one is 3-pointers attempted. And so if you take those 4 categories, I can go in the locker room and I get a stat sheet and let's say at halftime I see that we're winning 3 out of the 4 categories. It's usually that fourth category that we're not winning as to why it's either A, still a close game, why it's a 5-point game instead of a 20-point game. Because usually it's lopsided the other way. So I look in the recruiting process, I look for student athletes that can affect multiple categories. And so we always have in our program, you got to be doing one of those 4 things, hopefully 3 out of the 4 or 4 out of the 4, but that's what we're doing. And so, the first I want to start is, with assessing your team is take a look. What is the strength of your team? Like truly, what is the strength of, the team that you're inheriting, your high school program, whatever it might be, and start really, really broad. Like, don't be super specific to start out, just really broad. What do I have? So the first thing that I look at is how many people can create shots for themselves. So that they don't need any help whatsoever. These are the slashers, maybe the people that can be post finishers. They're not just someone who can just catch, and they're not just a dump off where they just dump and shoot it, but they're actually using quality post moves. Are they an off the dribble shooter? And then I add one that uh might be uncommon, but I like to talk about is people who get
Hmm.
offensive rebounds. You
Yeah.
you don't have to draw up a play for someone who grabs offensive rebounds. Like they're just someone who goes
Just
and
get it.
gets it,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't need to draw up a play. One of the toughest players I ever coached against, she played at Fort Scott Community College, and our varsity reserve program was playing them. And she was a JUCO All-American, and she was like 5'8". And I kid you not, I think she's playing D2 somewhere on the East Coast now, but she averaged 18 rebounds at like 5'7". And I mean,
Wow.
half of those
Had
were
to want it.
offensive. And I mean, it was almost Dennis Rodman type, just wherever the ball was, that's where she was. And I mean, man, just loved her game. But, they never ran a play for her. And she averaged, like I said, like I think it was like 14 points and 18 rebounds. And they never ran a play for her. I mean, she impacted the game without a single ball screen, without a single catch and shoot. So I add that into that category of people that can help you without needing help themselves. So that's where your base is. Those people that can do it.
Yeah.
Can they do multiple ones? But those are people that, at the end of the day, when things break down, they can at least create a quality opportunity for you. The second thing is how many people need help but can help the program. So these are spot up shooters. Spot up shooters sometimes need help. I don't like to use this, people might get mad, but think about Klay Thompson. Like
Hmm.
I know he can do more. He's an NBA talent, but like he's known for catch and shoot threes. And this year he struggled around the 3-point line and they had to kind of move him to the bench, and so you have to
Yeah.
have those people. They need help. They need that defender to shoot off of them. They need those ball screens to get them open. Maybe it's someone that they're just a dump to post, where the post player comes out, you might not be able to throw it into the post and watch them work, but they can finish around the rim. So you have to take those two and say, how do those two help each other? How does the people who can create for themselves, how can they make the people who need help be better around that program? And so that's how you start basing the offense. And then of course the third one is how many of your players will struggle to help you on the offensive end. That they might not have a whole lot of quality to them, but I'm here to tell you there's still major use for them. And so one of the things that
Yeah.
I first learned at the college level, um, the first year that we were here, our post player really did not have good range outside, and we found out that whenever she would be at the top of the key, of course defenders stopped guarding her. They would just play inside the paint, and it got to the point where they were basically just hanging around the rim. We found out quickly that her screens were twice as important as anyone else's because usually, whether it was a ball screen, most of the time off ball, her screens meant everything. Because usually, if she set a good screen, we'd have a free runner to the rim, whether that girl was curling off of it, whether that girl was a spot up shooter, because they decided that she was not a quality player outside the 3-point line and them
Okay.
trying to cheat,
Yeah.
we decided to use her in an opportunity to go get other players. And so if you have that player that maybe the defense does play off of them, use them as screeners. Don't hide them in the corner and let the defense off, letting them cheat it. Put them in situations where that girl's now screening for the best players in your program to go get them open shots. Maybe it's something where they are staying on them as a defender, but maybe they switch, or maybe put them in a situation where they're having to guard that terrible defender who's guarding potentially the worst player in your program or the worst player on the floor is now having to switch on to one of the better defenders. Maybe you're making that defender talk in a different way, but just getting more creative than, all right, this person doesn't help me, so they're going to stand or they're going to cut aimlessly. Use them intentionally to get your best players open. And so that's something, those three things is how you base the offense. So you have to look and say, okay, let me play to the strength. And this is where we get specific. Who is my best scorer or scorers and how are they best effective? So we have I also do a little AAU, and the team I coach is pretty good, but we have a very solid post player who finishes around the rim. Um, like she's for people that were born in the 70s and 80s, her post moves are just they're just beautiful.
Throwback, huh? Yeah.
Throwback. Yes, she can step out and hit the three. It's why she's getting the offer she is, and she has a mid range and she can take people off the dribble. But where she's elite is she can post you up and she's gonna put you in a blender, and it's fun to watch. But I could use her out the 3-point line, and she would look kind of like an average 6-footer, right? But then I put her in the post, and so I had to adapt to her and say, all right, this is a kiddo that if I want her to be elite, I'm gonna have to go outside of my realm and go put her in the place where she's best effective, which is around the post. And so that is your base. Wherever your best scores are, that's the base. And then adding the supporting cast. And so I think a lot of coaches, we get tied up into the main action, whether it's the player with the basketball, the ball screen. And this is where you need to get and start looking off ball. And how can you manipulate the help that's around you? Right. So, like,
Mm,
for instance, look off ball and I ask myself, do I have the players that could get the defense to react like I need it to? So, I do a lot of work. I love watching small time basketball. There's some just incredible
yeah,
coaches at the
great stuff there.
NAI.
Yeah.
Yeah, great coaches at the NAI level, D2 level, mid-major. The stuff that the big times run just doesn't work for a lot of us because they just have players that just can do things that our players just can't. And so you got to look at, all right, who's having success with players that don't necessarily meet the talent level that they are playing. And then I look and I'm like, okay, I like that action. I like these post ups, but do I have the same at least type of players from my level to get the defense to react? So for instance, are they helping in the post? Are they doubling? Do I actually have a person that can finish that three off in the position to make that help? And if the help isn't reacting the way that I want it to, how can I get it to either A, react the way I want it to, or change what I need to do to get the defense in a different place so I can get my post player a 1v1 situation, or I can get the ball out of a
Mm,
double. And so I start looking off the ball and putting our best players that I have in the situation where you have to make them at least make a choice. Do you want to go double? Do you want to keep that post player 1v1? At least making it hard and making it to where we now have a decision where it's either A or B. And so sometimes I have to look at myself and say, me as a coach, I gotta make sure I'm putting the best players possible in that setting. And so yeah, so that's
yeah.
that's where
Uh,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, like no, I was going to say as I was writing down things that you mentioned, it's like what you do. It seems is you look at offense in a much there's so much to offense, and there's so much that players can do within an offense that isn't just limited to their ability to shoot a basketball, their ability
Right.
to drive or anything. All of the nuances, all those things you mentioned about like screeners and the way that players, fight for those 50-50 balls and get rebounds. And I think for coaches as they kind of think about what they have offensively, I think most coaches would realize that they have a lot more than maybe they
Yes.
realize that they have, but just the way that they have to think about their offensive players' skill set is a little bit beyond maybe what we traditionally think of as offense.
Right. Right. And so, like, for instance, I'll use Sarah Hunt as example, after about 7 to 8 games, I mean, she came in late last year, and so this was kind of her coming out party. And so around the eighth and ninth game, I realized that the defense was reacting different. So it got to a point where I'd go back and rewatch film, and every time Hunt would touch the ball, I would pause and start looking at the four other defenders. How are they reacting? What are they doing? and
Hmm.
and then press and play and seeing, okay, where's the help coming from most likely? What are they doing? How can I manipulate the offense to go get the ball in the right place? um and like you said, like we have players who maybe they don't get it done like we would necessarily want it to get it done, but we have to say, okay, they do this at an excellent level, or maybe I do need to create some new possessions or different possessions. And we got to start looking off the ball to kind of get those things, get those looks or get those options. And so, I'm a big believer in playing into the weaknesses of the team that we're playing. And also just, as every team is different. And so what team A does to us is not going to be what team B does to us. And so we have to have the ability to make the decisions to get out of it. The last thing I'll say about when
Hmm.
you're in the process of choosing an offense, and how you assess it is then you have to kind of look outside of your team and you have to say, all right, what I'm thinking about doing, will it really work against the teams that I play? And so if you're in a conference that usually runs zone, but you're really scheming for man stuff or whatever it might be, or you like this stuff, but it won't really necessarily translate to teams that switch or whatever it might be. Then you have to look at that. And so, for us, it's what gives us the best chance to beat the best teams in our conference. We want to go to the national tournament. There's certain teams that are ahead of us in that, and we got to make sure that our system works in a way that gives us the best chance to step over that. And so, does our system play to their strength or does it play to their weakness? And if it does play to their strength, how can we stay within our strength but still also play into the weaknesses that our opponents have? And I think that's a big piece that sometimes we miss. Our conference is extremely tough with,
Yeah.
8 seeds beating 1 seeds, and it's a tough
Yeah.
conference.
Wow.
And so, at the end of the day, we got to look at the teams that are in our conference and say, okay, this might work for us, but is this going to put us in the best position possible to beat the teams that we need to beat to achieve what we're trying to achieve?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
we do that, that's a decision that, our coaching staff has to make when we kind of implement what we want to do.
Yeah, because going beyond just your own team, right? You look at big picture and know kind of what you're going to be up against and what you're going to be facing and
Yes.
the amount of uh nuances and things you got to have within your offense, especially to beat those competitive teams. You really have to think about every player's purpose and what every player is going to be doing and how they're going to fit in against these tough matchups, because it sounds
Right.
like in the competition you're facing, you can't have any player not be a threat offensively. They all have to have a role that they play in helping the offense be successful.
That is so correct. And I just, for us, like you just said, we have to have everyone be a threat. And
Mhm.
it might not necessarily be okay, like I said, one of our players, early on was not the best shooter and they made us pay for it. Well, let's put her in positions where she is a threat. And then also just using her as a threat, maybe not to shoot, but in other situations. And so, and it's just the difference between the next level. But the more people that you get to be a threat, I know I was at the high school level for several years. um, the more people that you have to become a threat, the better. If you can get 3 to 4 people at the high school level to at least be talked about. I tell our girls all the time, what do you think the other teams are saying about you? What are they saying about how you play? What are they trying to take away from you? Are you going to be able to adapt to what they are taking away from you? And yeah, it's just a conversation I think we can all have to self-assess ourselves and our programs as well.
Yeah, no, no, 100%. I really like that. Again, that idea of, making sure that all your players know that they have a role to play, empowering them for the role they got. No, that's great. I
Mhm.
wanted to ask too, Coach, as you kind of, you being at the college level, you're going to be consistently working in new players. New players come in and out. Even at the high school level, of course, new
Mhm.
players kind of come in and out. And I wanted to ask you about that idea of going about kind of integrating, new offensive concepts and working these new players into your new system. I know your situation's a little unique now in that you have so many players returning, but I guess in a
Mhm.
general sense, um, how would you work on making sure that players can kind of come in and get ready for whatever system they need to play in, and they feel that that's going to be a smooth transition for them?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question. The first thing I do is try to break the system down into the smallest section
Hmm.
possible. And so we do a lot of teaching in 3v3, whether it's defense or offense, but we're just talking about offense. But, you know, I'm gonna just use horns, or let's just use we use some horns sets within us. And so we play 3v3 horns. Um and that's where we do most of our teaching. And so it may be getting away from 5v0 for a little bit or 5v5, and just really talking about the meat and potatoes of your offense, whatever that is, whatever you think gets you the most points. If it is a post up, let's say you do have a student who can really post up and put work in. Okay, then you need to put someone who's making the entry pass to the post. You need to put a help defender on the other side and make them make decisions 3v3. Because the best way to learn the offense, you can run the most beautiful offense with the greatest concepts, but if they're missing the part that actually gets, quality looks, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. It's just a beautiful motion offense. It's just
It
a
looks
beautiful,
nice, right?
right. It leads to a beautiful set with a wide open roller, and dad sits there and throws his hat on the ground because how could you miss that girl? And, I would say it's probably because we need to actually teach them. And so for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, we'll do some 5v5 stuff or 5-on-0 or whatever, but a lot of it is 3v3. We also spend a lot of time, and it saves us a lot of time in season. I'm not telling you how to do it, but we we spend a lot of time going through every action that we have in our offense and teaching them not only the names, but how does this play work against teams who soft hedge, hard hedge, switch, ghost, whatever it might be, whatever we might see, we go through it. That way, when we run horns, but we tell them, hey, they soft hedge on this, they know how horns is going to operate and work within that. Right. And so now I don't have to, when we have a scout that needs to be done in 2 days, and I'm like, hey, this is a team that doubles ball screens. Well, we've already worked on that since we touched a ball back in September, October, right? And so
Yeah.
now we get to have, and all that came from 3v3 work and them seeing these actions work over and over and over and over again. And so we spend a lot of time in 3v3, and I will, for the first part, I'll stop them periodically and just teach, okay, this is what happens. This is where you need to get your body on the screen. Make sure you're rolling in this way. When you ghost this action, make sure you end up here. Make sure your hips are getting here. Um, I was a former point guard, so I'm pretty hard on my point guards. Where are your hips? Where are your eyes? When you come off of this ball screens and the roller's coming, can you see where the help defender's coming from? Can you make that quick decision? If they're having a problem with it, then putting them in that position over and over and over again. And if we go 5v5 too fast, they're just going to kick out, right? Or they're not going to actually see what might be available to them. We used a lot of Spain PNR. We use the 77s, the staggers, those things. And so we put them in that situation where I'll give them and I'll say, all right, for the next 5 minutes, I'll give them a series of 4 or 5 plays. All of them have different actions that we run within our program, and I'll say you have to stay within these 4 or 5 actions. So it isn't even like we're working on a PNR screen. Like it might be a PNR, it might be a Spain, it might be a 77. And we get to just kind of operate within those, and they get to play 3v3. Look up the rules to FIBA 3v3. It is amazing, and it's such
Yeah.
a great tool for us to learn. You
Yeah.
can get a lot of quality, and the ball is in the player's hands. They have a better percentage to get for those of you that are trying to grow your players and get them to be better players, put them in that situation where the ball's in their hands. They're having to set those screens. They're having to roll. They're having to do the things that maybe you wouldn't want them to do now, but they will have to do in a couple of years, right? And so we do that. We compete within that. And kind of like what I said, maybe they score off of that or they make the right read off of that, whether it's 5v5 or 3v3, we'll give them an extra point. So let's say they run a set, the point guard makes the right read, gives us a 7 or 9. Let's say it's a layup. We might give them 3 points instead of two, just so they know that that's what we're looking for,
That's what you
right? Like
want.
that,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what we want. And what happens is if you get competitive kids, they'll stop trying to do their own thing and they'll start doing your thing because you've added extra weight, you've added an extra point. So now they're trying to get that 4 point, 3 point shot, instead of maybe potentially breaking out of the offense and those things. So that's something that we do quite a bit. So we do a lot of shooting drills that are around what we want to do offensively, and whatnot. And we're not afraid to change something if we see something that works better. And so I'm not, if I, have a certain action that I think is going to work, but then in getting to know my players, I see that this works better for them. We have a girl within our who's a post. I teach ball screens a certain way, but it became very apparent that she excelled at this other way, and I made the switch for her, and it works,
Yeah, you
right? So like
adjusted. Yeah.
you got to adjust, and so maybe uh just come to the realization that when we see something that works great, lean into it. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's and I think that's too is a big concept and a big idea is getting stuck with the way that you imagine the offense should look or the way that
yes,
you've already pictured it or the way that you've already planned it out and then being willing to, tweak it though or adjust it or let go of a part of it because either something works better or your players feel better or feel more comfortable doing something else. I think as a coach, that
right.
ability to just sort of let go and let that adjustment happen and see how it goes versus trying to, make it a certain way that you feel like it has to go, I think could also make a huge difference.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you get to kind of, we want our players to take ownership in our
Hmm.
in each of our programs. We've all heard the saying that a player-led team will beat a coach-led team every time. And when we empower our players to learn and grow, we had one of our best practices right before one of our biggest wins, and in the NAI world, if you're an NAI women's coach, you'll know this name, but her name's Grace Byers. She's scored almost 4,000 points in her career. One of the best players I've ever seen live. She's hard to guard for
I
several
imagine, yeah.
reasons. Um, but hearing our student athletes talk at a high level basketball sense on how we're going to guard a certain action or what we were going to do to put Grace Byers in a situation where now she has to defend a certain action and maybe getting her in foul trouble, right? Like they started to kind of think the game just a little differently because we spent so much time really raising their IQ, teaching them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of mistakes come from just low IQ. And we at some point we gotta look to ourselves as coaches and say, well, how can I raise their IQ? It might not be film, it might be just breaking it down to the smallest point possible and building that up. We do spend some time on 5EO. I know that's kind of sometimes a uh I don't know if you want to say like a Rocky thing, or I know people have their different opinions on 5-on-0. We
I
do it
do
for
it.
yeah. We do it for 10 minutes of practice, and basically towards the middle of the year, we should have every set ran correctly. Now, we also don't have like strict sets, so like let's get that in, but like if we call something, I'll make weird subs. I'll put people in different positions, right? It's so that way they have to kind of work through maybe a difficult sub. Maybe, one of our guards gets in trouble, so I have to play with two post players or whatever it might be. They have to work their way through. I gotta be able to call whatever I need to call whenever I need to call it, and we need to be able to
Hmm.
adapt. And then right after that, we go straight into 5v5. And I am adamant, once you go 5v5, it's not only the initial action, but I want to go back to the help. What is the help going to do? Right. So, for instance, we have to look at, another player named Claudia Hunt, who is an incredible 3-point shooter. No one comes off of her. So we love putting her in where her defenders in the help position because they almost deny her. Well, that means our Spain PNR is going to be open. And so just understanding where your players are, right? And who's
Yeah.
going to manipulate the help in the best way possible and getting our players to understand that it's not just the initial action. It's not just the action that's on the ball. It's what the defenders are doing off ball. That's where the scores are going to be. And so, and praising them when they get it right. Right. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I was just, it's funny. I'm hearing you talk, and I'm just thinking about some of the things that, I communicate with my team and I communicate with my girls about, and I know it sounds rudimentary and sounds basic, I'm sure, to those listening, but I think to reinforce this idea to your players, and I do this to my girls about, not worrying about necessarily like that initial action, right? It's how much can you make that defense move? How much can you make them have to talk? How much can
Yep.
you make them have to make second, third, fourth decisions and recover and literally, break down that defense.
Right.
I think that sort of part is something that I think a lot of coaches definitely always need to be considering, because I think our initial actions that we want to run in our offense, those initial things that we want to do, I mean, if we can get those right away, great. But how
Right.
many times do we get those right away? How many times do we have to go into, whatever that secondary action is, or continuing, or the
Right.
motion, or whatever that next set or screen or whatever it is that needs to be set, and paying as much attention on all of those pieces to it, because I think, as you kind of mentioned, like that is where you'll kind of see, whether or not that help defense is really going to be there. That's where you really find those gaps or those weaknesses in the defense.
Yeah, no, you hit it spot on. And like you said, like, against the teams that maybe you can beat, or
Hmm.
you're gonna get those actions, right? And like those are things that, if you have a team that is just better than maybe the opponent that you're playing, you're gonna get it. But when you get into, I don't care if it's districts or playoffs, or for us the conference tournament, when we get to the teams that we need to beat to get where we want, not the teams we can beat, but we need to beat, the initial action, they're gonna take it away. Like, we're not gonna, what Columbia College does, our players could tell you right now what they do. It's just stopping it, right? And they'll know what we do. Same thing for every team in our conference. Like, it's
Right.
not rocket science what these teams are going to do. But what happens is you got to take away the initial action. I think that's what Columbia does so well, is we take away their initial action, and they do such a great job of getting the ball to where we decided to overhelp or whatever it might be. And so we're trying to do the same for us, is saying, okay, yes, you're going to get this here. We've played teams and we'll watch film, and it's like, okay, great. I understand you got this over and over and over when we played this team, but just know when the best teams in our conference come here, this will not be here. We have to be able to look for other things, and pushing our players to dig deeper into the offense in those.
Yeah, and so much of that, I imagine, for you comes with experience, comes with being in those situations, come with
Yes.
practicing, and there's so much. And for me as a coach, this is something I know I had to learn when it comes to kind of thinking about my offense and tinkering with my offense, is that my players are going to make a lot of uh decisions that in that
Yep.
offense that even I wasn't aware that they were going to make, or they're going to see things that I'm
Right.
not aware about, or they're going to have a
Right.
thought process that may not be, for better or for worse, something that I considered. And I think that it's almost impossible for us as coaches to be able to predict like what our players are going to do in an offense
Mhm.
against a certain defense that they face. But having that patience, and knowing that it's a learning experience, and that every new defense that they see, every new situation they find themselves in,
Mhm.
is a chance for them to grow and get better, versus like getting really frustrated at those mistakes as they happen, I think is a big difference in seeing your offense improve.
Absolutely. And just, when those mistakes do happen, our players are watching how we respond,
Yeah.
right? Like they are. And so, when those mistakes happen, like there's a time and a place to, you know, have those type of tough conversations that we all have with our players, but there's also a time and a place to say, is this a new thing that they haven't seen yet, or is this an old mistake? Old mistakes get me a little
Mm.
bit more frustrated, right? Like and we all have those. But if it's something new, let's say a team doubles and we weren't expecting the double, and there's a couple turnovers from that situation, I own it to the kids. Like, I'm like, "Hey, that's on me. I should have prepared you better. Let's go back in to let's go get back to the process and get better, right?" And so that's
Hmm.
why I think it's also important for us. Again, the easiest way to do that is 3v3, 4v4, taking a player off, getting them in those actions. So, and putting the work in and trying to say, okay, these are the things that we know for sure we're going to see when we play the teams we play. Can I help my players effectively navigate through those things. And when something new happens, let's put ourselves in that situation. We end every practice with a scenario. So it might be 10 seconds, we're down four, something along those lines, and we play through it. That way they know the rules that we can play with. We've even done scenarios where, all right, second quarter, we're up 8 with 4 minutes left. We got to make it a double digit lead by halftime. And we just work through those things and try to make it as game like as possible, because when you do those game scenarios, that's where those things happen. And I'd rather them happen in practice than
Yeah,
in the game.
controlled environment where
Yeah,
mistakes are a lot like they're encouraged, right? Those mistakes
exactly.
and as I mentioned to many guests too, we learn so much as coaches when we see our players make mistakes, when we see
Yes.
them do things or make incorrect reads, because we need to know that. We need to know what they're seeing. We need to know what their thought
Yep.
process is. And to me, as a coach, there's very few things that are more valuable to me than watching my players make mistakes and then learning why
Absolutely.
they made those mistakes and getting in their head. I'd rather be able to have that conversation in a practice setting and get in their head than have to try and scramble and figure something out during a game. So I really like
That's
that
it.
situational stuff for
That's
sure.
it. We started two freshmen at the point guard. Or sorry, we started and then brought off the bench two point guards that were freshmen.
Okay.
And so I know I mean, even if you're a high school coach, you probably just cringed. But we brought them to
Took
play,
a
so
deep
we
breath.
played them.
Yeah.
Yes. And man, oh man, just what you said, like asking them, what were you actually like, not in a sarcastic way, right?
Yeah.
But
Tone of
what were
voice
you
matters. Yeah.
Right. What were you thinking in that process? Why did you think that weird bounce pass was going to be there or whatever it might be, right? Like, why did you make the read you did? And if you can understand what they're doing, then maybe you can put them in situations where, that's what they saw naturally, so maybe I need to put them in situations where what comes naturally will make it easier for them to see what I need them to see.
Hmm.
Or maybe it maybe is redirecting their eyes in those situations. And both of our point guards play vastly different from each other too. So again, like our offense almost ran differently, depending on who was on, right? And so as
Yeah.
far as that's
Sure.
concerned. Um, but yeah, actually sitting down and asking them, okay, what do you see? How are you making the read that you're making? And diving into that. But like we've talked about, doing that in practice instead of a game. You won't get them all, but
You'll get a lot. Yeah.
how many learning experiences can I get in the practice facility where I can talk them through it, have those conversations and those things? They're great. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to pick your brain on this before we hit our concluding segment because I wanted to get your thoughts and insights on this because this is kind of a interesting little question here that popped in mind, which
Yeah.
is as a coach who's working through the process of designing an offense, and you kind of look at the skill sets of your players, um, how do you kind of think about as a coach whether to emphasize, let's say you have a really good post play, for example. How
Hmm.
do you kind of go through the process of being a post heavy team and really focusing in on that versus just having the post as one of the options to go to while you have other things? So what is that kind of like when you know you have
Yeah.
strengths in one area? Are you thinking of really maximizing and trying to get the most out of that, or try to have that weave as just one of the options you can work within an offense?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. Um, so I'll tell you where I take this. Jeff
Hmm.
Boshi, he is one of the KU greats. He was the Missouri Southern head coach on the men's side. And they had a player named Cam Martin who was at KU for a while and has finished up his career at Boise State, but he was an All-American at the D2 level for a couple of years. Anyway, he's a post player, just an incredible post presence. And I got to talk to him after a game one time, and they doubled the heck out of Cam Martin everywhere. And
Hmm.
he said the majority of his practices were working on, that's where they saw that they struggled the most. And so they worked their way out of it. And so, he brought up the point, where your strength is, that's also where your weakness is. And so his strength was playing through the post, but the weakness is if they took the post away, they couldn't really find a good way to again beat the teams that they need to beat to get to where they want to go. And so for us, and he brought up the point, and it's something that I love to think about within our own offense is wherever your strength is, you have to find a way. Good post presence need good shooters. Good shooters need either good drivers or good post presence. Something to bring that defender in to get two on the ball. And so when we talk about being a post heavy team, and I wouldn't call us a post heavy team, but we do a lot of post ups within our offense. It's making sure that they know that the solution might not be getting it into the post player, right? Like it might not actually be with the post player ending up with the basketball. It might end up with people understanding that we're trying to get a post touch here and maybe over helping too soon and making the decision to get the ball out to the opposite corner or swinging the ball around as quickly as we can or whatever it might be. And so when we're designing an offense that has post touches with a dominant post player, it's again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but figuring out how's the help going to respond. It's not going to respond the same way because it's going to depend on who's in the corner. It's going to depend on the type of players that you have surrounding. Are they shooters? Are they slashers? What are they? And if they're shooters, then you're going to be able to skip or get the ball out rotated and get it from there. We also use a lot of screens on the weak
Mm,
side,
yeah, that's
uh,
big.
to get them to guard, and we make sure that the right people are coming off the screens. It doesn't matter if you pull a player that can't shoot; you're going to have to use your best player as a decoy. We bring Hunt off of screens just so her defender couldn't help, so they had to talk through it, right? So, like, a big thing for us is we want to create actions that can only be guarded through effort and communication. Like that's a big thing for us. And so doing that, whether it's
I
through the
like that.
post, whether it's through the guards, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that the defense is going to have to talk at an insanely high level. And they have to give maximum effort. So it's got to be that person helping and sprinting back. It's going to have to be talking through a couple screens. It's going to have to be, talking through split actions or whatever it might be and just having them have those conversations as a defense and living with the results and the shots that we get.
It's it's really interesting to kind of hear you bring that up as something where we think about our offense, running through our strengths or running through our
Mhm.
best players, but then thinking, okay, well, if I was defending against you, I would do everything I can to deny you the ball, double team you, do whatever it is that I can.
Right.
So then working with that player, say, okay, like as you kind of talked about, like what else can we do with you? How else can we kind of use you in a way that um is going to still really help our offense a lot, even if
Hmm.
even if you're being denied. What else can we work through with you and use you and put you in so that
Hmm.
it frees up everything else that we want to do? And then eventually you're going to get your opportunities because now they got to worry about all this other stuff that they weren't expecting, and all of a sudden you can get whatever's yours.
Yeah. Just to hit on that, one of my and
Mhm.
I'll try to paint a picture.
Okay.
But our best action was putting our best shooter in the short corner, making that defender the help defender, and then we'd run a high pick and roll. And when the pick and roll would start rolling, we would shoot our best shooter towards the 3-point line at the top of the key. And so all our point guard had to do was to look at our best shooter's defender. If they're stuck on our shooter, we know the roller's going to be open or the drive. If the person goes and helps, like every help defense should, then our best shooter is going to be open at the top of the key. And so that made it really easy for our freshman point guard. They're not looking at the roller, they're not looking at anything but the basket and then short corner because that's where they know the help is going to come from. And so maybe it's just helping our players direct their eyes and give them just an easy decision. Help defender stays, roller drive's going to be open. Help defender helps, my best shooter's coming to the top of the key with an open shot. And so
Mm.
again, like it's an easy action that again looks complicated. Like we run some dummy actions before we get there. So, it's not just sit up and do it. But at the end of the day, when we get to that initial part, the initial screen that happens, boom, then all our guards have to do is look for initial screen. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Coach, this This time definitely flew by, and it was great.
Yeah,
I have so much written down here, and I can't believe already it's an hour has
I
kind of
know.
almost flown by already. But I want to make sure that I hit up these couple concluding segments with you
Yeah.
before we're done here. Starting with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. You've had a lot of experiences, a lot of moments, a lot of things that you've been through. But what is one moment in particular that you could share that you think our listeners would be able to learn from?
Mm. Um, so my first gig was as an AAU coach back in 2012, 2013, whatever. And I thought I was gonna be the next Coach K or whatever, and we just got our tails handed to us. I mean, it was a tough go of it in this junior high segment or whatever. And I remember calling my director of this AAU program. And I was frustrated that we weren't being successful or whatnot. And it's a part of a ministry, and I still do ministry as part of it. And he said basically, are you preaching the gospel, and are the kids having fun? And I said probably not. Like I don't know if I was doing either one of those. I was really focused on the results, and he said, I don't want you to focus on anything but our mission towards the gospel and having fun. Like those are the two things I want you to focus on. Um and I did. And what I noticed was in practice, the kids were just going so hard. And I think they're going hard because my focus was, again, like I wanted them to come in and enjoy the process. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I was kind of growing my own style. And to this day, a big part of the transfer portal, these kids can get up and leave whenever they want. They don't even have to text me. They can just throw the deuces up and go. So a big
Hmm.
part of it is they need to feel valued and they need to feel loved in that, right? And so um I put in a lot of work to make sure that, not every day are they going to love coming into it, but I put a lot of effort into making sure that our kids enjoy the process. There is a time to get down in the nitty-gritty and put in your shots, hit the weight room, do those things, but if there's a part that can be, where you can learn to enjoy the process and enjoy to live not for the results, but just for the day to day, the camaraderie of the family, of the team. Um, that's something that I wish I would have honed in earlier, in my
Yeah.
career, is not be so outcome based, because to be honest, the moment I stopped focusing on the outcome is the moment that the outcomes actually started to go my way. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
uh
yeah. It's crazy how that works out, isn't
yeah,
it?
and get to, I think it's a huge reason for, where I am today is, we don't really talk about the outcome. We've talked about what the goals are as a program, but we don't spend a lot of time on it because, it's May, but there's things that can be done here in May that can affect what happens in March next year. And so we
100,
focus on those things, but also making sure that they get up and they have fun and they're enjoying the process of getting it. Not every day needs to be a dog day. Not every day needs to be a grinded out day. Those days will come, but are we creating dog days, or are we, trying to do our best to make sure that they come in and know that they're loved and valued? So yeah.
awesome, fantastic, Coach. That's you know, uh, and to your point, just to add a little bit, what you said was fantastic. I think when we get so outcome focused, we just miss so much along the way. We so focus
Yep.
on that end part that we miss like 90-95% of else that's going on, and all that progress and all that great stuff is happening when we just focus on this end result. There's so much more that is happening beyond that. And I think you just enjoy the coaching job a lot more. Your players enjoy it more, and you get better at coaching, like you said, when you just
Exactly.
take a step back and really focus on that process. Awesome.
Yep.
To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's your
Yeah.
platform to put out a final message, a final idea, a closing thought, anything that you want to leave the listeners with. I'm going to go ahead, Coach, let you take the floor. And don't worry, I'm not going to time you. So if you go over 60 seconds, that's okay too. Floor is yours, Coach.
Man, I appreciate it. This, by the way, it was a massive amount of fun.
Awesome.
So I
So good.
appreciate you
Thank
having
you.
me.
Mhm.
And so uh high school athletics is the last stop for 92% of athletes. Make sure you remember that. Like, and is your program creating lasting memories that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. And my mom always told me that people will remember how you made them feel. They won't really remember anything else, but they will remember how you made them feel. And so, I mentioned that my son's journey was a little bit different.
Hmm.
He has spina bifida. We found out when he was in the womb, and we ended up having to move to Houston, and we qualified for this brand new fetal surgery where they go in and they fix the spine in the womb, and he's doing incredible and meeting all his milestones, and it's just insane what modern medicine can do now. But all that to be said, I remember when we first found out that we were pregnant, and I was vacationing with my college friends, and they asked me this question. They said, what do you want your son to know about you? And I remember my answer. I said something about, I want him to know that, I'm great at my job, or I love him dearly, or whatever. And it was kind of surface level, and they were like, "Man, that's awesome, that rocks," or whatever. And when I found out that something was wrong and we didn't know if there was going to be a good outcome or not, I was talking to the players, and my player asked me the same thing, and I just mentioned, I just want him to know that he's loved. Like, that's all I want him to know. Like, that's it's so crazy how priorities change
Mm.
just because of something not being perfectly right. And I wish it didn't take that for me to remember, man,
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, I'm here to show my players love, that there's something different out there, that we can be a family, that we can create something that is special and unique, that goes far beyond um, the basketball court. And, my son has taught me in his short 5 months of life that, man, at the end of the day, it's not the wins, it's not the losses. I'm the most competitive person you're probably going to meet, but at the end of the day, I'm going to love on him the most the most I can. And it's ended up being great for my coaching career too, because that's what I need to show them most of all. So for 92% of your athletes, they're not going to college. They're going to stop. And so this might
Yep.
be their last opportunity to have a sisterhood, to have a brotherhood, to create something. And yes, that is more work for you. It's more work for me. It's My wife is a huge part of what we do. It's more work for her. But at the end of the day, we're creating something, and that is, we're trying to transform lives, and we're trying to leave these kids in a better place than what we found them. Make sure that the wins and losses don't get on top of the real mission, which is, we're here to transform those lives.
Yeah, well said. Appreciate you sharing that story as well. I think that that's something definitely we all gotta keep in mind. The basketball stuff is great, wins are great, and all that other stuff. But the impact and the opportunity we have each and every day to impact our players on a personal level and help them grow into adults. I mean, there's nothing quite like that. That opportunity is just truly incredible. So always something
Amen.
great to keep in mind. Coach Belk, I really want to say thank you sincerely. I mean, I have so much written down here that you
Great.
shared that was, I know, helpful to me, and I imagine it was incredibly helpful to all of us who are listening as well. I'm really excited to continue to follow your journey and see where
Yes.
this next season and beyond kind of goes. And it's been great hearing your thoughts, Coach. Go get it. Go reload with this roster that you got, and
Will
go
do.
go chase what you got planned for this coming year. This was incredible,
Great.
Coach. Really appreciate you coming on.
Coach, thank you for having me. It was wonderful. Great to talk to you today.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.